This is Groundeffected. My name is your dad, and that is a 3D sculpted Chunli by Abe 3D, which I have printed in 1/6 scale. But that would make a boring video, so I made it 1/4. Also, Gaahleri sent me this air compressor, and they also sent me one of their airbrushes to try out with this air compressor too. And for this entire video, I'm going to be using this Gaahleri 98D airbrush and this dual air compressor that they sent me. There will be a link for these in the description, so if you're interested in them, well then go and check it out in the description down below. To prime this model, I used the black version of this Kaleido primer, and to give it a zenithal highlight, instead of using white ink, I'm just going to literally use the white primer to do the same job. Now, as this model fits together pretty well, I'm going to put it together to do most of my highlighting of the skin tones. Most of the time, when I paint the skin tones on this model, I'm going to have it all stood together. There is no magnets in this model. I've used maybe a little bit of blue tack in one of the arms just so that it doesn't fall out, but mostly the model just stays together as is. Once I have what I think is a decent base coat for my skin tones that I can build on top of this later, I'm going to lock it in using a semi-gloss varnish. Now I'm showing you the gauge on my compressor here because usually I would airbrush at 40 psi for most things, generally speaking. For the next thing that I'm going to be doing on this base is I'm going to turn my airbrush psi all the way down so that my airbrush speckles or spits the paint out. This is not what you want when you're painting your model. However, in order to create a sandy base, this is exactly what you want when you're painting your model. So try not to get the two confused, and if you're painting sand, well then speckle that on and it will just look fantastic, just like sand looks speckly, because sand is not a solid color with a little bit of a shade in it. And especially if you've got an airbrush, you can make it speckle like this. It's gonna look a whole lot better. If you ever looked at sand, like really truly looked at it, you would see that it is made up of lots of different colored small little pieces of, well, sand. And so in order to create that effect, I'm going to be using a bazillion different colors here, because these are all the colors that are speckled in the sand. It's the same thing that is in the actual sand. It's basically like painting every single individual grain of sand, but by speckling the airbrush, I don't have to do that, and I can emulate the fact that there is sand on this base. I used a gloss spray lacquer over the black portion of the base to make it nice and shiny, and we'll address the fact that there was overspray on the sand later. But for now it needs to dry, and while it's drying I'm going to add in some of the pink bendy parts on the body, and for this I use a color called Orcish Dermis. Now this is virtually impossible to purchase, and I'm not sure if it's my fault or if it's just the fact that this color is just really difficult to find anyway, but everybody seems to be complaining about finding it. But speaking of complaining, there is obviously a complaint that I have about putting a gloss clear over my base means my sand was shiny. So I used a matte varnish over the top of my sand to make it go back to matte again. It's that easy, just a little bit of a brush, and because of the textures, it doesn't matter if there's any streaks. I just painted over the top. Now I'm going to move on to adding some highlights and also adjusting the colors of the skin tones a little bit more. I need to bring some yellow back into that skin because otherwise it just looks a little bit too pink. And pink is not the color I was going for. So I start out with a sunny skin tone and then I start working the highlights a little bit closer with something like a basic skin tone. And what it's hard to mention because there's so much going on so quick, but I want you to notice that when I'm doing highlights, my airbrush airbrush is much closer to the model, and when I'm painting the overall color of the skin, my airbrush is much further away. Speaking of further away, it's further away now because I've turned the air compressor down to the low compression power of air, and I'm speckling the same technique I used on the base, but this time I'm using some skeleton horde to speckle some freckles onto the body's skin. Now, of course, these will look a little bit crazy at first, so you need to kind of put them under the surface of the skin, and in order to do that, you're going to come back again with one of your skin tone colors, but this has got to be quite a thin down color, and you're going to paint that over the top of it. I used Reichland Flesh Shade to bring a little bit more tan back into the skin itself, and then I brought a little bit of a glaze of yellow over the top to bring some saturation back into the colors of the skin, because it does tend to get a little bit white as you go higher up in the value of the skin tone colors. I add a little bit of white ink into the last skin tone color that I use, and I spray very close to the model, and I spray very small spots to create highlights on the skin tone itself, and then I lock that all in with a semi-gloss varnish. Now, someone who is good at making videos at this point probably would have not forgot that they changed the color and not recorded this section, but I am not that person. So just imagine for a minute that instead of this dark blue, I was using a slightly lighter blue, which is actually just Prussian blue from the model color Vallejo paint range, basically. Now, moving on to painting the shoes of this lady, I'm going to use this sandy color and paint just like the heel and the side of the shoe, because annoyingly there is a strip of blue that goes through the center of it, and I feel like it'll be easier to do that strip than come back and cut back into the blue with the lighter color. I'm going to also paint the little bow strap thing that she has on her leg using that Prussian blue, and then when that's done, my confidence will be high enough for me to attempt painting these flip-flop shoe things. Basically, there's no way to tell you how to do this other than hold your breath, anchor yourself, and make sure your paint's flowing nicely. For her toenails and also her fingernails, by the way, I figured it was easier for me to just take a very light skin tone and paint the tips of them so it is like a French manicure. I hope that is the correct term for whatever that thing is that I created. For the gold portions on this model, I used a bronze from Monument Hobbies because this paint just flows exceptionally well and it covers very well as well. So basically it's an amazing color all around, and it looks like gold. It doesn't have to be that bright. Technically, you don't want to be too bright with it because it looks a bit weird, so it's the right color to be a gold in color. And while I paint the body and the chains that go around it, I'm going to quickly tell you about the sponsor of this week's video. This is Abe 3D, and he creates some amazing models, but he also has other sculptors that also create models for his Patreon as well, and genuinely they make some incredibly well-fitting, extremely good looking models. If you are interested in painting mostly specifically female models, but a lot of them are from comic books or games that you play, things like that, they are genuinely incredibly well sculpted, and the fit of the cuts and things is usually top class. So if you're interested in these kind of sculpts or this model in this video specifically, then go check out the link in the description. Usually it's the only thing that I put in the description is the link to get to the sculptor's work, so go check it out and let them know that I sent you. As we get into the portrait section of painting this model, I just want to mention that I don't paint very realistic models ever. I really don't like to paint realistic. Not that I don't like it, it's just that it's not the style I like to paint in. I prefer just kind of doing whatever my own thing is, and usually whatever it is just comes out. I don't know what it is, but it is a thing that I do, and it seems to be the style in which I like to paint. Now, if you like to paint like I paint, well then follow the easy steps that I've set out and provided for you in the video, and your model should look remotely like mine. Hopefully. I mean, I can't really control what you do. If your arms behave like a 5-year-old, well then that's your own problem, and I can't stop that from happening. Either way, this portrait was pretty simple. All I did was painted her hair brown, I put Magos purple over her lips, and also put that into her eyes as well. A thing that I like to do to create the eyes looking a little bit more softer is to put a very bright skin tone color underneath the bottom eyelid. This doesn't work on all models, but it will work in this case. The next step for the eyes is to then paint the eyelids. I do this now because if there is any overspray, or what I mean by that is if I miss the eyelid and paint a little bit over the inside of the eye, it's fine because I can now come back with this white stage and paint over that at this point. However, I know I said the word white. This is not white. It is a highlight skin. It's more like an ivory color. Some people say this is too bright, but I don't care. It's the style I paint in. If you want to darken it down after doing this, take some Megos purple and put it in the corners and across the bottom of that sclera. It will make it look more realistic. It's that simple. This is the style I like to paint in, so this is how I do it. The next steps of the eyes for me is to paint then obviously the irises, and they need to be shaped well and put in place because that is the most important part. If they are skew, your model's going to look weird and people will point and laugh, and you don't want that, so obviously don't put them skew. I'm going to use a dark brown, then I'm going to progressively work my way up to a slightly lighter brown in order to create the brown eyes of this model. I'm then going to put a black in the center, and the only time I use white is to actually put the specular highlight in those eyes, and after that's done I can put a gloss varnish onto them as well as the lips, and that's when I can then take the head of this model and put it onto the model and call it done. Okay, so we have reached the end of yet another Groundeffected video, and obviously this is a time where I need to say a massive thank you to everybody who watches the videos, everybody who comments. Make sure, in fact, if you are there, then share this video with someone, because that helps to get more views on my channel and content, which obviously helps me to make more. I mean, not that you have any reason for that, but I like doing it. So if you like watching this content, well, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and let's just try get some more people to see it. That way I can make more of this content and keep this whole circle revolving. This is a good time for me though to say a massive thank you to my Patreon. Over on my Patreon, you get the palettes, the color palette. Every single color that I use for this model is laid out for you in an easy printable fashion, so you can just print it and go and find those paints for yourself on your shelf or in your hobby store. Of course, there are many other things, like for example there's STL files and behind the scenes posts, all the rest of it, but I want to say a massive thank you to those who support me on Patreon, because of course without them the lights would not be able to blind my eyeballs. And thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Aid 3D. There is a link for them in the description. Go and check them out if you want this model for yourself. And this is the time where I get to tell you that if you didn't like anything you saw, I really don't care, and you should probably just f*** off.